Hello and welcome back, and that's right, it's time for the best 4-bay NAS of the year. In this video I'm going to give you 5 different NASes and one little honourable mention that are, for me, the 4-bay NASes that I would personally recommend for each of their individual reasons. Now, I do this every year. I talk about different NAS types, different storage types, different utilities for recommendations. And although this video is going to be going out at the end of 2022, December 2022, recording now on the 29th of November, right now, this is still going to be pertinent 6 months into 2023. If you're watching this beyond about July, August 2023, there may be other hardware out there. But prior to that point, I can say right now, we've a lot of confidence based on all the new releases I know about and the way these companies release their brands, that these are the best 4-bays for their respective reasons. But before we go any further, it's worth highlighting an honourable mention. Now, I will go into the categories in a little bit, but it's worth highlighting there was one NAS that slipped. One NAS that should have been on this top 5 list of 4-bays, but was squeezed out. But it deserves the honourable mention, and it's this. This is the QNAP TS453E. Quad-core Celeron, 8GB of DDR4 memory, 2.5 GBE, couple of M2 NVMe slots inside there that can be used for storage pools and caching. It supports 22 TB drives. It's got USB 3.2 Gen 2, 10 gigabits per second. It's got HDMI there on the rear that can be used for a KVM. It's a great bloody NAS there. Why didn't it make the cut? Well, for a couple of reasons. One, at the 4-bay level, a lot of 4-bay users at that point want to get the performance out of their drives. And even though it's got only 2.5 GBE there, it lacks the ability to add greater gigabits per second up to that 10 gig limit. Now, there are other NASes on this list that don't support that feature either, but at the same time, they make up for it in other ways. And the TS453E, although it's got 8GB of memory, it's fixed to 8GB of memory, and its lack of ability to scale up to 10 GBE was the only thing that kept it off this list. So even though it's not in any of today's categories, if you see the TS453E on sale somewhere, it's still a pretty darn good NAS, and also more affordable than a couple of the others that we can talk about here on the list. But before we go further, another thing we should say, if you are coming into NAS for the very first time, if you are arriving at NAS and don't quite know what you're doing, then it's worth highlighting that all of the NASes that I'm going to talk about today all support the following guaranteed. Number 1, they've got RAID functionality, RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5 across all of the bays. You can part populate or fully populate. They've also got support of things like snapshots, bolting on cloud storage there, and iSCSI targeted LUN storage as well. On top of that, you've got remote access, network access, 2-step authentication, you've got password and multi-account control there. All of it with admin control disabled by default, which you can enable if you choose to. There's individual apps for surveillance, for photos, for videos, for music, for DLNA, for UPnP multimedia sharing, and their own first-party cloud access point via a remote HTTPS cloud if you need, included with the cost of your NAS there, no additional purchase. Support of virtual machines, support of containers, support of Plex Media Server, support of MB. All of that is rolled in to these devices, as well as being completely compatible with Mac, with Windows, with Linux, with a whole host of applications available on iOS, Android, and if Windows Mobile Store is still a thing, I'm sure there's a couple knocking around on there. And all of this with every one of these systems arriving with 3 years of manufacturer's warranty, and in some cases you can expand that to 5 years. But that's enough of the old TNC. Let's crack on with our first category, the best all-round 4-bay NAS of the year. Now, a lot of you must have seen this one coming. This has been in the background of my videos for the better part of 7 months, sitting there on that shelf right there, waiting to be moved to the other side of the table. This is the QNAP TS464. I was genuinely lucky enough to get one of these for review in the spring of 2022, because I know a number of you that saw that review, that saw me talking about this device, all shared the same statement afterwards. Where the hell is it? Because we talked about it in the early stages of the year, the TS464, and it is genuinely the best all-round NAS I've ever used in 4-bay, by the way. But a lot of people, when I made that review, when I made lots of videos about it and wrote some articles about it, They weren't able to get hold of one of these for about 4 to 5 months because of hardware shortages, because of regional availability and lots of factors like that. It took a long time for this to arrive on the market, and now it's here, and we've even seen it, last month on a few little promos on Black Friday. It is gaining a lot of traction. But why do I call this the best all-round NAS? Because it's actually not the most expensive NAS on this list, but it's up there. It's like the second or third most expensive. So why am I calling it the best all-round? Well, all-round doesn't mean it is excellent at everything. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that every single facet and feature of network attached storage right now is possible with this NAS to a high, medium, or in some cases low degree. But if there's anything in the world of NAS that you want to do, this can do it. It can do it to a very degree, as I say, but it can do everything. Now, the hardware inside is as follows. It's got an Intel Celeron processor, the N5105, kind of the prosumer CPU of choice at the moment in terms of that mid-range there. Now, that is a quad-core 2.0 GHz CPU that can be burst up to 2.9 GHz, getting very close to the 3 GHz limit. It's also got a lovely bit of integrated graphics inside that goes up to 850 MHz, its own graphical performance with that integrated graphics on board when needed. It also arrives with 4 gig of DDR4 memory that can be upgraded to 16 gig. Again, that's scalable inside as you see fit, and that's DDR4 memory up to 3200 MHz as well. Also, the system arrives with 2 M2 NVMe slots inside, PCIe Gen 3 x 1 slots inside there. And those slots allow you to use M2 SSDs as superfast caching, superfast storage, or superfast Q tier, when it combines all the storage of the hard drives and the M2 SSDs into one giant blob of storage, and then intelligently, as data is being accessed with different degrees of frequency, moves, not copies like caching, moves data to the appropriate areas there. But bear in mind they are 3 x 1 generation, so they are capped at 1000 megs each. Do bear that in mind. The reason for that being capped in there is because of the spread of the chipset and the architecture of this device in a number of different ways. For a start, the device has USB 3.2 Gen 2 throughout. That's 10 gigabits per second there, and a huge degree of support of different USB devices from their own expansion devices in 2, 4, 8 and 12 bays of storage connected via different means. And you can connect 2 expansions of this device, by the way. But on top of that, support of KVM, keyboard, video, mouse. So you can use USB 2 ports there for your keyboard and your mouse and not waste any USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports, of which you get another one up there. There's even adapters for USB to 2.5 gigabit Ethernet and 5 gigabit Ethernet for this device to add further network connectivity. Indeed, you can even take advantage of the 2 2.5 GBE ports as well to add another 250 to 500 conventional megabytes per second performance to your network connectivity. But that's not your lot. There's also a PCIe upgrade slot. Now, I've installed a combo card in here. In here, I have got a 10 GBE and 2 NVMe card inside this system. I've added another 2 bays of M2s and a 10 gigabit Ethernet port thanks to that PCIe upgrade slot, a PCIe Gen 3 x 2. Bear in mind again, that means there's only 2000 megs to play with on there, so be conscious of what you're doing. But at the same time, the idea that this has the scalability there to add even more performance, adding 1 to 200 quid at upgrade cards within its performance lifespan, makes it, for me, by far the best all-round 4-bay NAS there. And that's not even including QTS5 with its bevy of applications in terms of home and prosumer use. It's by far the most customizable NAS software out there with an enormous degree of third-party support there. And whether you're going to use it to combine and integrate with your existing hardware and network setup, and you're going to use this as a synchronization or backup tool when you're using Hybrid Backup Sync 3, hybrid mount, I should say, or you're going to be using some of the cloud tools, or just integrating it with Google Photos with that Mars application we talked about a few weeks ago, or you're running Plex Media Server or their own apps and more with QMaggie and all the other AI supported services inside. It's just the most customizable, scalable, and best all-round 4-bay NAS there in the market right now at the end of 2022 and into 2023. Now, it should come as absolutely no surprise that when it comes to NAS software, the best 4-bay NAS is going to be a Synology. DSM from Synology is just unbeatable. All the other NAS brands include a software platform with their solutions. You get a combination hardware and software, and in most cases with other brands, it's 60% hardware, 40% software, and even in some cases it moves a little bit more towards 30-70, but that's a talk for another time. When it comes to Synology, the ratio is very much the other way. At the very least, it's 60% software, 40% hardware. And with the new generation of 4-bay released from them in November 2022, this is the DS923 Plus. I think it would be fair to say there were elements of contention when this arrived on the scene, because it was coming off the back of the incredibly popular DS920 there from summer 2020. But the DS923 basically supports anything that Synology DSM platform is promising, from its integrated storage services to its enormous range of first-party applications. And again, that includes all of not only the standard class applications you'd expect for storage and media and synchronization and tools and stuff like that, but their own collaboration suite of applications, from everything from Synology Drive to Synology Office, Synology Chat, Synology Calendar, Synology Mail, Synology etc, their virtual machine tool and more, that are designed to wean you off third-party alternatives in Skype, WhatsApp, Microsoft Office and more. Indeed, you can also use Active Backup Suite to synchronize with SaaS software as a service platforms like Office 365 and Google Workspace that you may already be using in your home or business life. And then with those services, if you lose internet connectivity, it can be problematic. Whereas you can funnel those into the NAS and then work through the NAS, still using those services, and then slowly migrate over to the Synology tools, or just keep the Synology there in the background as a bare metal synchronized backup with those services. So if you do lose internet connectivity, the NAS still has all of that data that you had up there on the Google or Microsoft servers on the NAS. And then while you carry on working with the data natively at home, talking with the NAS, when the internet connection is restored, all of the changes that you've made and all the work you've done then gets synchronized there in the background. It's just, as far as software platforms go, it's user friendly, it's heavily invested in, and even when you look at Synology NASs from 2012, 2014, 2016, a lot of users are still using those devices because a number of those prosumer devices from back then are still running the same software updates that are available now. This software is updated so regularly, and with DSM 7.2 on the verge of appearing on the scene in December 2022, it's just a great NAS. Now, in terms of hardware, it is something of a mixed bag. The CPU inside is the AMD Embedded Ryzen R1600, a dual-core 2.6 GHz CPU that can be burst up to 3.1 GHz. As I say, dual-core, but 4-thread that you can separate in a number of different ways, whether it comes to directly in virtual machines or during tasks and services when the system juggles. Its lack of integrated graphics has drawn a little bit of ire from a lot of home users and a lot of kind of prosumer multimedia users, but in every other regard, that CPU does do a very good job. It may have a slightly higher power consumption, which on a 24/7 server may be problematic for some. It does mean with that CPU that it does open up the door to things like ECC memory with 4 gig arriving by default that can be scaled up to 32 gig, and it has M2 NVMe slots on the rear, and also has the privilege of being the first Synology NAS that allows those M2s to be used for caching and storage pools, something we thought we'd never see Synology do. On top of that, we've also got Ethernet connectivity, but it's 1 GBE, which I know annoys a lot of people, but at the very least Synology have provided the option to add 10 GBE later on. That is an optional upgrade for about 120 to 150 Nika, depending on where you are in the world. But that 10 GBE upgrade there, which is proprietary, which is something of a theme with Synology, it has to be said, still means that this system is scalable in a number of ways, and with that software backing you up, and with the system now allowing M2 NVMEs as storage pools, it's just a solid NAS solution overall. And as a combined hardware-software solution, a great choice, but in terms of software alone, it is still, by far, the best 4-bay for its NAS software in the market at the end of 2022. And power. A lot of you come into this because you don't want to use some third-party software. Some of you just want to use your own software and you want the NAS to just sit there and be an absolute tank in the background. And when it comes to by far the most powerful 4-bay NAS in the market right now at the end of 2022, it's easily the TVS H474. This device is monstrous in terms of its 4-bay connectivity, in terms of its hardware connectivity, in terms of its internal hardware, and just simply for what you're getting for your money. It is by far the most expensive NAS, as one would expect. This is not a NAS for hobbyists. This is not a NAS for amateurs. The TVS H474 arrives with a Pentium CPU inside. It's a 12th gen Pentium there. It is a Pentium Gold, the G7400. It is a dual-core 4-thread processor there, with the system arriving with a clock speed, or that CPU arriving with a clock speed of 3.7 gigahertz when it needs to be boosted up. It also arrives with UHD 710 integrated graphics on board, so it's already its base level dwarfs everything else in today's list, just based on the CPU alone. It arrives with 8 gig of DDR4 memory that can be scaled up between 64 and, I've yet to test it, 128 gig of memory, depending on the memory modules there. You are going to be using SODIMM, which again is insanity to me. With that CPU and that memory, you've got to think, what else are you going to be doing with this device? Well, first and foremost, it doesn't just arrive with ext4 like all the other systems we're talking about in today's video, with the odd hint there in the background of BTRFS. But on top of that, this system supports ZFS, zettabyte file system. That means that you've got faster RAID builds, RAID resyncs. You've got resilvering there, built-in inline data deduplication, inline data compression. All of those features and services that are just the plus points of ZFS. I didn't even mention triple parity RAID Z and stuff like that, is rolled into this 4-bay compact NAS there. LCD panel there on the front. It also has USB 3.2 Gen 2 10 gigabits per second connectivity. It's got 2.5 GBE, of course, and it's got HDMI at 4K 60 frames per second built in there. But the real beauty comes into what you can take advantage of with that newer gen CPU. Now, it has M2 NVMe slots inside there. They're PCIe Gen 3 x 4. There's a couple of them inside there, which is all fair and well. You know, a couple of 3,000 to 4,000 megs M2 slots inside. Yum, yum. Take advantage of that. This 4-bay, now it's a 6-bay. However, the real thing is the PCIe upgradability, because this generation of NASes from QNAP is the second ever PCIe Gen 4 series of commercial NASes. PCIe Gen 4 is, you know, that was rolled out in 2020 and a lot of kind of prosumer PC rigs, and we never really saw it in the world of NAS until QNAP released their Flash Station series, the 1290FX. And in this system, you have a PCIe Gen 4 times 16 slot, and that's a CPU slot there, and another PCIe Gen 3 times, I think, 2 or 4 slot there, which is all right, but we're not going to talk about that. Now, that PCIe slot there, that Gen 4 slot, yes, you can slam a graphics card in this if you like. Use it for VMs, use it for Plex, or even more Plex transcoding and performance there at 4K, because this NAS can handle 4K Plex, okay? It can handle. And if you came to this video wondering about the most Plex 4K supporting 4-bay, you're looking at it. If you were looking at a 4-bay NAS and you wanted to spend more money on your hard drives, go for 10, 16, 20, 22 TB drives, and you wanted to spend a lot of money on that storage, but you still wanted the NAS to be compact and support 4K transcoding or high-end virtual machines, you're looking at it. That Gen 4 slot as well supports upgrade cards. Now, you can use upgrade cards like QNAP's own QM2 series of combo cards and individual storage cards. Now, PCIe Gen 4 M2 SSDs, like these 4 here, all of these give you 6,000 to 7,000 megabytes per second performance each. This system supports cards that will let you have 4 of those drives inside. 4 of those, each of those drives giving you up to 7,000 megs, depending on the read, write, and the architecture and the RAID. Yes, you can RAID them together as well. There's even combo cards from QNAP that have got 1 and 2 10 GBE ports and M2 NVMe slots inside that this PCIe Gen 4 x 16 slot can allow for you. Again, in terms of power, it's just unbeatable. Now, I wish it had an i3. That's the one complaint I've got for it, because when you look at the 6 and the 8 base systems and a lot of the different revisions that were originally talked about, you can see that other 12th gen Intels, the i3, the i5, the i7, there was even talk at one point of an i9, were on there. Maybe they'll arrive down the line as the series rolls out. But I wish there was an i3 version of this, at least in a quad-core form, because the dual core is the only thing that stops this NAS being perfection for me. And overall, when it comes to the most powerful 4-bay, it's unquestionably the H.474. Now, value is one of those words that gets thrown around quite a lot. Value can mean different things. It doesn't necessarily mean cheap, and it doesn't necessarily mean good. Sometimes you hear people talking about something being, oh, it's excellent value, and you have to accept it can come with a compromise sometimes with that term. I'm pleased to say, however, that in the case of the LockerStor 4 Gen 2, it is the best value because it's really hard to get better hardware for this price. What you're getting here is pretty much everything that all the other brands are offering, either together or individually, all in one system that also happens to be lower in price, which is crazy town banana pants. Let me explain. The LockerStor 4 Gen 2 is the refreshed version of the LockerStor series that arrived in 2020. It scaled up almost every single feature internally and externally on the device, and also has one little hardware feature not available in any other NAS right now. So it arrived with an Intel Celeron inside there, the M5105. Get used to hearing that CPU a lot at the end of 2022. Again, quad-core Intel Celeron, integrated graphics, 2.0 to 2.9 gigahertz CPUs there. Lovely stuff indeed. It also has 4 gig of DDR4 memory that can be scaled up to 16 gig when you need it. It also has USB 3.2 Gen 2 connectivity, front and back. So again, there's 10 gigabits per second USB connectivity and support of a myriad of different hardware peripherals, as well as network upgrades that are USB to 2.5 and USB to 5 gigabits per second. It also has an LCD panel there on the front, and you can indeed set this whole device up from scratch without using software. So if you're an IT installer that's going to be installing a lot of these, you don't even need to use the app. You can navigate the whole thing with that panel, and indeed that LCD front mounted panel there also allows you to monitor the device's individual network IP ports. If there's an alert or an error, you can view what it is, monitor temperatures and more. All of that without going into a client device, going via two-step authentication, going and logging in via the rigmarole. If there's a beep, you can just go, what is it? And it's as simple as that. Now, it's a metal chassis, plenty of cooling, and again, metal, although it is going to result in a little bit more ambient noise of hum and clicks and whirs of drives in there. If you go for bigger hard drives anyway, you're not really going to notice, but still nonetheless, it's worth highlighting that this is probably the noisier of all the NASs that we're talking about here today because of its construction, quite close to that of the H.474 I just talked about. Now, it arrived with 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports. It's worth highlighting ASUS were the first prosumer NAS brand to bring 2.5 GBE to the desktop sector, and that was as early as 2019, and even prior to that, I think at their first release of 2018, but still, they're rolling out and they're still continuing with that support on their devices, as well as those USB support towards greater network connectivity too. Now, on top of that, at the bottom there, you've got an HDMI output there. This system supports KVM, keyboard, video, mouse, and that HDMI is HDMI 2.0B. So it's 4K 60 frames per second, but with a better bandwidth utilization between HDR and SDR utilization. Ultimately, it's a much more fluid visual bandwidth there over HDMI, thanks to that revision in the B series. Now, things about this device that continue to surprise me and shock me. So first and foremost, there's a 10G upgrade option there. Now, it's not as clear cut as you think. I'll get onto that in a moment, but you can add 10 gigabit Ethernet to this if you choose. But I tell you what else you can add. Inside this device, thanks to this ventilation slot here, are 4 M2 NVMe slots. This device has a card plugged in there in that slot where you can choose to put 10G instead of this if you like, and it allows you to add 4 NVMe SSDs inside. That turns this 4-bay into an 8-bay. Those 4 bays can be used for caching, they can be used for storage pools, or you can mix them up, use 2 for 2. I have 4 individual storage in single or a JBOD mode, or put 2 in a RAID 1, use the other ones for caching. Do what you like. And remember, you've still got the main 4 storage bays there that support up to 22 TB drives there. Now, I mentioned You can use that slot there for the M2 NVMEs, or you can use it for 10 GBE. According to Acer Store, they are also developing a combo card as well. So that combo card, much like QNAP's one, will allow you to use both a 10 GBE and M2 NVMEs on a single card, thereby giving you all of those features and services. As I say, when it comes to value, it's really hard to argue with this. And then when you dip into ADM, which might not be as evolved as Synology and QNAP's platform, it's still a damn fine platform, ADM. And ADM still provides a lot of support of first and third party apps. It's incredibly intuitive. The user-friendly nature of their GUI is still very, very good indeed. And although it lacks a few of the killer AAA plus apps of Synology and QNAP, if you weren't going to use them anyway, who cares? Because this device, if you're going to use it for Plex, if you're going to use it for your backups, if you're going to use it as a map storage drive, if you're going to use it for multimedia, if you're going to use it for surveillance, these features and services that arrive with are still pretty darn good. And again, you just can't argue with the value at this point. Now, there'll be some of you in the comments that will go, I've seen cheaper 4-bays out there, and I'm sure you have, and I'm sure a lot of them had Realtek powered CPUs. I'm sure a lot of them didn't have 4 M2 NVMEs. I'm sure a lot of them didn't have the scalability in memory and network connectivity this has. Value is about the best value for money, not necessarily the lowest price. But I'm glad you asked. Let's talk about the lowest price prosumer 4-bay of 2022. As I'm sure you saw coming, the lowest price 4-bay when it comes to a prosumer buyer is this from TerraMaster. TerraMaster has long had the reputation of being the best bang for buck option when it comes to network attached storage, and although they didn't quite win the best value, that goes down to Acer Store, you can't argue much with the price tag of the F4423. This is their 2022-2023 generation of NAS devices. A lot of the specs you're going to be familiar with, but let's rattle them off anyway. It's got the same Intel N5105 CPU, that quad-core Celeron integrated graphics processor. It's got 4 gig of DDR4 memory. They say it's scalable up to 32 gig. I've yet to test it up to 32, but TerraMaster do maintain that they have done the testing. It's not just showing 32 gig, but you can actually use the 32 gig there, even though the CPU is rated up to 16 gig there. It's not impossible. On top of that, the system has the 4 bays of storage, which can be used for individual storage if you choose. You don't have to fully populate it, or fully populate if you like. And TerraMaster even has its own fluid RAID system now. That's right. It's not just Synology and dead old Drobo anymore. It is TerraMaster as well. T-RAID allows you to mix and match storage drives, and you don't have to do that on day one, but imagine you put 4 TBs in there. 3-4 years down the line, you want to add a bit more storage. You don't want to be locked in at 4 TB, but you also don't want to wipe that data or find some way to stick it elsewhere while you upgrade it. This allows you to stick in a couple of 20 TBs if you chose, and unlike a traditional RAID, which classifies every single drive by the smallest drive, so whatever the smallest drive is, every single one of those will be viewed in that fashion. The fluid RAID systems like T-RAID on this allow you to only have to spec up in redundancy for one of the biggest drives. So yes, you need 20 TB of redundancy, but then it allows you to use the other 20 in the other 4s. So again, flexible RAID and all the innovations and improvements that have arrived in TOS 5 in their AI-supported photo application. They've got one of those now for human, facial and thing recognition. They've got a surveillance application now for IP cameras. They've got a lot more support of backup and synchronized cloud tasks as well as connecting with SaaS services too. They are the only brand I know of that have a complete isolation mode built in, which a lot of you did request in 2022, because a lot of NAS devices, if you want to completely sever it from the network or the internet, you're faced with two options. One, slowly, surgically going through different services hoping nothing breaks, or pulling out the LAN cable and again hoping nothing breaks. Or with TerraMaster, in the options menu, there is one option. You can just go isolate mode, and it immediately disables all internet connected services. It removes all any PHP or third-party applications, remote access services, and turns the NAS into a network only stronghold. And again, you don't have to be an admin to do that. It's incredibly useful there. And again, if privilege led, and once it's turned off, you have to reboot the system to get around that. So you can't easily flick it on and off like you want. So if you're concerned with anything, switch off the connected services. Now, in terms of network connectivity, the device has got a couple of 2.5 GB E-slots, of course, it's 2022, and a couple of USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports there. So again, 10 gigabits per second connectivity. There is an HDMI port, but KVM support on this is not available. There is no parallel GUI that allows you to interact with the system like you can on the QNAP or the Acer store. But what you can do, of course, and we've shown this in other videos, is use this to put TrueNAS on. If you like, you can install TrueNAS on this puppy, and then, although it will most likely invalidate your support and warranty with TerraMaster by doing that, you can still, with this device, use all of that hardware with a third-party NAS OS. Again, TrueNAS, or it was known as FreeNAS then, Unraid, that kind of stuff. All of that is possible on this device. Again, looks and design wise, still a little dated. They have improved it, but it could do better. And it's not the quietest NAS, but still, nonetheless, it is a great system overall. And when it comes to the best pricing for a NAS, it may not be the best value because it is more about the hardware than the software, even though TOS has improved. I will say that given that this series is regularly on offer on Amazon and you're in Prime Day and Black Friday and stuff like that, you'd be hard pushed to find a better priced 4-bay in 2022 and, dare I say it, most of 2023. But this has been the best 4-bay NASes of the year that I would recommend that you should buy in 2022 or 2023. Naming this video has been so tough. If you have enjoyed this, click like. If you want to learn more as we go through more of our best of the years, click subscribe. If you need help choosing the right NAS for you, use the free advice section linked in the description over to NAS Compares. If you want a little bit more of an opinion led, if you want to talk to a few people, get some ideas, throw it out there, use the free community support forum, Ask NAS Compares. It's manned by me, Eddie the Web Guy, and again, he does most of the work on that, I'll be straight with you, and the rest of the NAS community. If you've got a question or a query about your system or something you're thinking about buying, whether it'll do the job, use that community support forum. And finally, if this video has actually helped you choose the right NAS product for you, and if you were going to buy from Amazon anyway, make sure those two things are true, then please use the links in the description. They take you through to Amazon directly to the store in your region. It won't cost you anything extra, and anything you buy via those links will result in a small kickback coming back to me and Eddie and NAS Compares, and it helps us do what we do. And again, only use those links if you were actually going to buy from them anyway, and anything you buy when you're there, we get a kickback. It's as simple as. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. If I don't see you, I hope you have a lovely Christmas, loads of mince pies, have a few, have a wonderful time. And other than that, I will see you next time.